Hello， 大家好，欢迎聆听 UC3P。
Welcome to the University of Chicago Public Policy Podcasts. This is UC3P, our eponymously named podcast on policy, politics, and current affairs. My name is David Raban, and I'm the production manager for what we like to call the main page. Today, we're excited to introduce our brand new mini-series, Bite-Sized Policy. It's a collaboration with the Paul Douglas Institute, a student-run think tank at the University of Chicago. The Paul Douglas Institute, or PDI, identifies problems with public policy, does quantitative research, and proposes solutions to various nonprofits and government institutions. In each episode, you'll hear UC3P podcasters talk with PDI researchers about a specific problem and a proposal on how to fix it. We're trying to keep the episodes short and sweet so that you're able to listen in, know the issue, and understand what you can do about it. We're planning to release these episodes every month or two. Today's episode is about referenda, with a lot of focus on Illinois. So you know, a referendum is a way for people to directly pass a law without having to go through the legislature. Now, without further ado, here's our first episode of Bite-Sized Policy.
Hello everyone, this is Jacob Lepick with Bite-Sized Policy with the Paul Douglas Institute. Across the U.S., recent ballot measures have been instrumental for legalizing marijuana, redistricting, and increasing minimum wage. With low trust in politicians and institutions, are referenda viable options to create policy? Here to share their research are Rory Gates and Jack Votava, two authors of a recently published paper assessing the Illinois referendum as a tool for democracy. Jack and Rory, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much, Jacob.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit curious. Can you just talk about the three questions that motivated your research?
Yeah, so kind of the original genesis of this research is we wanted to find out, given so much news about referenda, like the Brexit referendum, like Turkish constitutional reform, like, before the Supreme Court ruled on it, all sorts of gay marriage referenda across the U.S. Were referenda actually a successful tool for democracy? Or did they reflect some sort of populist vision that had an unhealthy effect on institutions? So we kind of broke it out into some more manageable pieces, which were, one, looking for what democratic policy and social outcomes were fueled by referenda, like what sort of thing actually happened through referenda as opposed to regular legislation. Two, what factors drove, a referenda to succeed or fail, especially with an eye to things that weren't the direct will of the people. Was campaign spending influencing it? Was the time of day? Was the, various biases? And the final question was just a subset of that question. It was specifically, how are these outcomes influenced by spending, given that it's such a hot topic right now?
Yeah, so you focused exclusively in the paper on Illinois referenda. Can you give a couple of examples of referenda in Illinois?
Yes, the most famous one and the only citizen-initiated referendum in the history of the state of Illinois would be the referendum in 1980 that shrank the state assembly from 177 members to 118 members and got rid of multi-member districts. And this is the Reagan era, so voters were very enthused about shrinking government and reducing waste. I believe it's like 70% of people turned out to vote in that particular referendum and overwhelmingly approved shrinking the state legislature.
So referendums, they work. Is there anything you have to complicate that?
Yeah, so there are some potential areas of caution. So One finding, we had and was reflected in the literature is a strong status quo bias in referenda, which is good or bad depending on, how you interpret it, meaning that voters are actually quite reluctant to pass referenda that create substantial change. Some specific mechanisms of that are if someone spends a lot of money, influencing one side or the other, it has an effect on the vote. But $1 more spent on a no vote campaign than a yes vote campaign has a lot more effect. So it's a lot easier to strengthen the no votes.
That's pretty interesting. And this was interesting, too, that Illinois has restrictions on what type of ballot measures can be placed. Why is that? And are those beneficial or not?
So Illinois is actually very unusual in having restrictions on its referenda. And quite frankly, the purpose of the restrictions is to kind of eliminate the idea of like a citizen-initiated referenda as a policy tool. So referenda can only be posed in Illinois if their subject is a specific clause of the state constitution, and the way that they modify that clause is both structural and procedural. So, for instance, there was a measure in Illinois to eliminate gerrymandering, and so people circulated the petition, got enough signatures, tried to get it on the ballot to take districting out of the legislators' hands. And that was struck from the ballot by the state Supreme Court, because even though it pertains to the relevant clause of the state constitution, it wasn't apparently both structural and procedural in the way it modified it. So really, the restrictions, like Rory said, there's only been one citizen initiative that was ever successfully on the ballot in Illinois. It basically shuts down the possibility of any referenda that the legislators themselves don't decide to put on the ballot, of which there are a couple every cycle.
So does this overall, do you think, limit direct democracy in Illinois? Is this working, or should these restrictions be removed?
Well, it seems like it's working for the legislature in terms of they can maintain their power and prevent citizens from usurping it. But our overall recommendation was that these restrictions be removed, because the literature is pretty clear that states that have the initiative have healthier democracies. People trust the legislature more, give more to political candidates. The legislature's bills reflect the public opinion a lot better. The results are pretty strikingly positive in almost every area you look at for initiatives.
So you researched, you went over through and did the literature review. What did your research add?
What we did, so first we looked at, like other states in the literature. What we identified from that was we wanted to test for was status quo bias. And then we also wanted to test more generally whether referenda were actually expressing citizen outcomes or there was some sort of latent, unobserved bias. So the two proxies we had to measure that were referenda outcome in Illinois by kind of the policy area. So, for instance, was it the case that, a referenda on taxes were less likely to pass than referenda on healthcare or something like that? And the second proxy we looked at was how referenda outcomes in Illinois were affected by voter turnout. In the latter case, we found that with greater turnout, referenda were less likely to pass, which kind of reinforces the status quo bias, meaning that when people are interested, when there's a lot of interest in the referenda, when democracy is strong, people tend to be more cautious about referenda. And as far as the policy topic, we found that in fact there were statistically significant variations between different thematic policy areas, which we actually interpreted as a healthy sign because, it means that perhaps voters actually had opinions on one area as opposed to another. There's not just some constant overall background rate, like you could slap anything on the ballot and expect to get it passed with a certain probability. Instead, it really matters the politics of what you're going for.
That's pretty unfortunate because I think we all have some things we'd like to just change immediately, right? That'd be nice. So you proposed a couple recommendations in the paper. You've talked about one of them already. Can you share the others?
Our recommendations were really related to two areas. One, enabling the initiative. So like I was saying, there are referenda in Illinois, but those referenda are placed there by the legislators. Like they pass a bill saying next year citizens are going to vote on this. And legislators aren't bound by it. They can choose to do whatever they want with the results. The initiative, varies. It would take away the, limitations that citizens can only propose their own referenda about this one specific area of the state constitution the one specific way. The other thing we were thinking about, very much related to turnout and, the statistical analysis we did, which is that referenda are not fundamentally different than other types of elections. They still have, both based on the literature and the analysis we did, many of the same biases in terms of turnout, in terms of campaign spending, meaning that if turnout is low, if people don't care, if people spend a significant amount of money, the outcomes will in fact be distorted. And even though this is a, quote, direct democracy tool, you can still get unpopular results.
Do you have any other thoughts about referenda? Do you think we should have more of these?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Illinois' restrictions are, quite frankly, probably undemocratic and a consolidation of power into the hands of legislators that, quite frankly, I think means it's time for more democratic will to be expressed. I think that there are, like the failed gerrymandering initiative, pieces of legislation that the people want to see passed that the legislators have systematic will to block. And so I think that having the initiative in Illinois would really be able to strengthen a lot of the systematic and policy tools available.
Yeah, absolutely. I think adding the initiative and making it a more robust process by which citizens can contribute to politics will help us hold the legislature accountable and make longstanding changes that we need in our state. So, yeah, absolutely.
So last question then. Let's say you have the chance to write the text of a citizens-based referendum and get it on the ballot. What do you go for?
I go for limiting campaign spending. I think that, for instance, the 2018 gubernatorial election was the second most expensive state-level race in the history of the United States. Just inordinate numbers of millions of dollars get spent in Illinois every year. And quite frankly, it's a huge barrier to entry, and it creates a lot of resentment and apathy among Illinois voters. I mean, Illinois voters are super cynical of their politicians, and they have one of the highest distrust rates of our state anywhere. So I think if there's one place that the citizens would want to start with initiatives, it would be publicly financing campaigns or otherwise restricting campaign spending, in some way to get off this ridiculous train.
I would go for gerrymandering reform. I think that gerrymandering goes at the heart of what's broken in Illinois politics, and it's what's allowed Michael Madigan to stay in power for something like 40 years now and have almost singular control over state politics.
All right, well, thank you to Rory and Jack for spending time with us. This is Jacob Lepik with Bite Size Policy. We'll see you soon.
And that's a wrap on another episode of UC3P. The Bite Size Policy team consists of producers Iris Chang and Advait Ganapathy, interviewers Jacob Lepik and Tala Ali Hassan, editor Miranda Zhang, and executive producer Joanna Lepori. The team receives production assistance from Saumya Karun. Our assistant production managers are Arjun Mota, Olu Ogidan, Saumya Karun, and Suo Wu. Our communications director is Thomas Krasnation. Our finance director is Donovan Harvey. Our publisher is Haz Yano. Our intro music is Knockout 2 by Datubi, and our outro music is Yes Yes Y'all by Matt Large. Our cover art was designed by Shirin Raban. If you want to hear more podcasts, check out our website, uc3p.org. And if you want to contact us, our email is theuc3p@gmail.com. Before we go, I want to give a special thanks to the Paul Douglas Institute for working with us to create Bite Size Policy. If you're a longtime listener, you'll remember that we previously worked with them on 2 episodes. One was on Chicago soda tax, and another was on environmental sustainability. PDI is a great partner, and we encourage you to check out all of their research papers online at pauldouglasinstitute.org. My name is David Raban, and stay tuned. We'll be back next week with the Executive Director for the Aspen Institute's Energy and Environmental Program, Greg Gershani. Hi, Suo.
Hi, David. Yeah, he hasn't told any joke yet. Don't mistake us.
I think that